Alright, YouTube, I'm sure you've all heard about this war on Christmas that Fox News is talking about. This dates back several decades. This isn't a new thing. I remember this from when I was a kid. They're trying to outlaw Christmas. They're trying to make people say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. It's terrible and anti-American, and it's against Christianity, and it's a war on Jesus Christ, and keep Jesus as the reason for the season, and all those old slogans. So here's my take. I believe that in the public school system they should have holidays, not specifically Christmas or Kwanzaa or Hanukkah. At the official level. I'm not talking about like students. I think students should be able to give each other whatever cards or whatever greetings they fucking want, because they're not hurting anybody. If someone gets offended, then they're just too damn politically correct. And political correctness is one of the major problems that we have in this country. We're starting to look like Europe. I mean, we really are. People get offended so friggin' easily at whatever anyone else does. But the state institution of the actual public school, I can understand why they would want to ban the use of terms like Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever. If a school was founded with a bunch of Satanists, and the Satanists wanted to celebrate a pagan Yule and dance around a bonfire on what you would call Christmas, but is actually Yule, and wanted to sacrifice, fake animals to the whatever gods, or a bunch of pagans got together, or a bunch of Wiccans, or a bunch of, any of these groups, and there were any Christians or Muslims or Jews in that setting, like, for instance, maybe it's the only school within 100 miles, it's like in the middle of the desert in Utah or something. Oh, we don't have any choice but to go to this school, and they're trying to force us to worship these pagan gods. There'd be a big uprising, there'd be a huge outcry, and you'd have 1,000 fundamentalists on the lawn of the school complaining about how it wasn't fair, it was unconstitutional, it was a war against their rights, it was an affront to the First Amendment. Because it's a public school, it's run by the government. The government's not supposed to respect an establishment of religion. And by retaining that right of each individual that's using the public school system to practice their own religion in that public school setting, it's no longer acceptable for the teachers or administrators necessarily, less so the teachers, more the administration, to force a specific holiday on people that has a religious background, whereas saying Happy Holidays has no religious connotation. Most people celebrate some sort of holiday at that time and space, whether it be Yule or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever. It's different to have Christmas celebrations or Hanukkah celebrations or whatever, unless it's a private school that's already religiously run, then they can do whatever the hell they want. But like I said, I would caveat that by saying, number one, there is no war on Christmas. Walmart saying Happy Holidays rather than Merry Christmas is not going to war with Christianity. It's trying to attract new patrons that might get offended by the notion of Christmas and who don't celebrate it. For instance, Jews, Muslims, fairly large groups within the country, not necessarily the majority, but smaller but still large groups within the United States that obviously are going to go shop somewhere. They might get offended by the Christmas reference. It's not a war against Christmas, but as I said, the political correctness surrounding it needs to stop, because political correctness is almost always bad. People get offended too frigging easily. If you want to walk up to a stranger and say Merry Christmas, you should be able to do that, just as I should be able to dress as a Satanist. I should be able to have a pentagram, walk up to a group of Christians on Christmas and say Happy fucking, New Year's Eve and Happy Yule. I should be able to do that. I should be able to walk up to them and not have to worry about being sued or something by having a pentagram on, oh my god, by saying my own religious beliefs, oh dear, oh my, it's a war against Christmas. And Christians are among the most politically correct group on the face of the earth. And you probably wouldn't realize that listening to Fox. You'd probably think, oh, well, these wonderful right-wing Christians, they always stand for the First Amendment, never are they politically correct. Oh, Ron Paul's on TV. Good. But the strange thing about Christians, and I experienced this firsthand because I used to be a Christian, Christians consider it an insult and a war against their religion and consider themselves persecuted whenever anyone does not kowtow to their religious beliefs. This is primarily among fundamentalists. This isn't among, liberal Christians. Certainly they're not like this. But at the same time, they go around complaining about other groups having their own right to worship, and they say, "It's Christmas! Jesus is the reason for the season." And what they don't understand, number one, from a historical perspective, no, Jesus had absolutely nothing to do with the solstice. Jesus has nothing to do with the original holiday called Yule. Jesus had nothing to do with the very pagan rites that surround that date. The Catholic Church took the holiday that the pagans were celebrating and ascribed their own meaning through the birth of Jesus to that date. And they did this in order to incorporate the pagans more easily into Catholicism, because they figured if we sync up the two holidays and we point that similarity out to the pagans, perhaps some of them will convert. And that's what happened. Most of them converted without a problem because they looked at the holidays and they said, well, we're already celebrating this date. Maybe we're just celebrating it for the wrong reason, but we can still have the same celebrations and burn wicker men or whatever, because the Catholics were all about burning people at the stake and so forth. So it was all good for 1,000 years. But what you've got to understand is there's no war on Christmas. What there should be is a universal worldwide war against political correctness, because it really just sucks and it makes the world so much more boring when people can't express themselves in a public setting without fear of being sued. And that goes for the media, that goes for public schools, that goes for people on the streets. If they want to say, if someone walks up to me and says Merry Christmas, I'm not a Christian. I don't care if they're saying Merry Christmas, I'm not going to get offended. It doesn't matter to me. It has no real meaning to me. I don't celebrate Christmas, so if they want to say it, who cares? And if I want to walk up to somebody and say on Halloween, happy Feast of Beelzebub, I should be able to do that too. Political correctness just makes no sense. People have a First Amendment right to speak their minds. Personally, and here's one final point, I believe that the First Amendment extends to people under the age of 18. There is no constitutional precedent for the same rights in the Constitution not applying to everyone. That includes minors. The only constitutional precedent for that is that in modern times we've frowned upon the use of things like the First Amendment and the Second Amendment among minors. That doesn't mean they don't still have those rights. It's just like technically the states have the right to regulate drugs. The federal government technically does not have a constitutional right to do that. But the people were reactionaries back in the 20s and allowed the federal government to take that power over. They didn't have the right to cede that power to the federal government. Similarly, there is technically no federal right for the federal or the state governments to regulate minors without acceding to the Constitution. Technically, anyone of any age has the same First Amendment that anyone over 18 does. Just because they haven't registered to vote doesn't mean they're not protected by that same constitutional right. So I would say, personally, I think everyone should rise up and just defeat political correctness once and for all. I mean, being respectful to others' beliefs is one thing. Being forced to be respectful in a very bland, cookie-cutter manner is totally different. Political correctness sucks. And so I can sit here and I can say, happy fucking Yule, and sacrifice a goat, and nobody can do anything about that, because it's my First Amendment right. I don't care if the Christians get upset, just as if they say, Merry Christmas on my comments area, I don't care, because it doesn't offend me. Peace out.